from a business perspective, telling good stories is way cheaper than just running ads nonstop, right? Because if you run an ad, the second you stop the campaign, it stops.
Telling good stories is key. That's the core principle of today's guest, Christoph Trappe, Chief Content Officer at Growgetter, former journalist, and a trusted partner for businesses looking to connect with their audience successfully. Welcome to the Design Rush podcast. I'm your host, Kia Johnson, and today we're tackling business's biggest challenge. How do you tell a story that actually matters? One that connects, converts, and keeps working long after the ads stop.
Why are you telling the story? I mean, you're just sitting at the bar and talking about nothing, right? So that's not the point of business storytelling. The point is, what is your narrative? How does it fit in with the customer's narrative and the client's narrative? And I mean, that's really how you have to do it. How do you fit in there? And those are the things you have to talk about.
Christoph bridges the worlds of journalism and marketing to unpack how strategic storytelling can help you build trust for your business, punch above your weight, and win big. If you're ready to stop shouting into the void and start telling stories that stick, you're in the right place. Got a story worth sharing? Email us at spotlight@designrush.com. We're here to make it headline worthy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights and redefine how you grow your business. Let's get started. Hi, Christoph. Welcome to the Design Rush podcast. It's so wonderful having you here with us today. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you.
Christoph, you've actually got a journalism background, so I'm sure the sort of realm of storytelling is something that is second nature to you, and hence why you've ended up being so strong in the industries that you are in currently. So what I want to find out from you is, in terms of storytelling, it has actually been a key driver, for building strong brands. And how did you first realize that this sort of storytelling has a power, and how would you say it's actually helped you personally in scaling your own career and also your business ventures?
So many questions in there. I really appreciate it. So the thing is, I've been telling stories basically as a journalist, and these are not made up stories. They're real stories to the best of our abilities at the time, certainly. And then I realized, I was moving into marketing, and companies really have issues telling good stories, right? They're just like, oh, buy our product, donate to us if they're a nonprofit, whatever. And it's just, there's a point in time to do that, but it's not always, most consumers aren't ready to buy right this second. So certainly, the Content Marketing Institute came about. We had Joe Polizzi, we had David Meerman Scott talk about, the new ways of marketing, and all those things influenced me, certainly. And then I kind of melded it with my own skills, which are, basically very journalistically founded storytelling skills. And I saw that there's a market, people wanted to tell better stories. People wanted to figure out how to do it. And now I have the background it's been a while, but, I did it as a journalist. So there's certainly other ways to learn these skills too, but that's where I came from. And companies want to do it. And the other thing from a business perspective, telling good stories is way cheaper than just running ads nonstop, right? Because if you run an ad, the second you stop the campaign, it stops. But you have good content on your website, it ranks high, you have good content, all these different places, it shows up, forever and ever. I searched for my name the other day, there's podcast episodes like on page 1. I barely remember them, they're like years ago. So they still show up. So there's a definite business value as well.
Authentic storytelling is so important. And I think in terms of longevity and just sustainability, if you're a brand or an agency, and also just speaking to your customer, really getting into their sort of hearts and their minds, there's so much more power in that.
Everything has a place, when people say to me, oh, but do we have to do this new short form video trend? I'm like, do you have a podcast? Yes. Just cut up the podcast. There's your short form video strategy. There's also a place for ads, but it's not as simple anymore. It's just running ads, right? There's high competition. People are in different places. How do you find them? So I'm not saying get rid of ads, but you have to make them part of your overall strategy, and you have to also tie them back together. I'll give you an example. Still, one of my favorite examples to this day. You have a website, people drop off on a certain page, and how do you get them to come back? Run a retargeting ad, right? And figure out why they drop, what's the next step in the journey, and get them to come back or go to the next page that the ad goes to. And I buy stuff of ads all the time, so it's not, don't get rid of them, but how do you tie it all together instead of having these crazy silos?
I would like to find out from you, what would you say is the sort of one fundamental mistake that you see companies making when it comes to storytelling itself? And then how can they sort of course correct that mistake to land bigger clients?
I think if I only had one answer, and certainly there's a number of different mistakes, but if I only had one answer, I think it's that people don't understand and don't think about their customers as much as they should think about them. So, for example, when business owners write articles or they talk about things, everybody sees everything from their own lens in life, and you really have to see it from your customer's lens. And then how do you tell a story that they care about? Now, that doesn't mean you can't tell some of your personal stories just because you want to tell them. But where you can really have an impact is if you understand what is your target buyer, what do they actually care about, and then you share those stories, you share those articles, you share those videos. And that is really, really hard for business owners. And I think the number I saw on Marketing Demystified was 80% of executives say they understand marketing, but only 20% actually do. So, it is hard. It is hard to wrap your head around when you first start. And then you have to know, what are they like? You can't just, if you're just guessing, that's, you might be right, but you know how guessing goes. You might also be wrong.
Christoph, you've obviously worked with like a range of diverse industries. How can your small to your mid-sized businesses leverage storytelling to like punch above their weight, and attract enterprise level clients?
So first of all, it does take time when you do it well, especially once you start. There's a little bit of a rabbit hole sometimes you can go into, and especially if you're a perfectionist. But if you can get past that rabbit hole and the perfectionism thing, nothing is ever perfect anyways. There's a lot of shortcuts you can take. You can take, different shortcuts even in design, right? Like design something quicker or whatever. Podcasting. If you know what you're talking about, you can just talk about it. Like you sent me your questions earlier and I read them, but like really quickly, just like, okay, yep. I don't have them in front of me. I didn't like write out answers. Even if you wouldn't have sent them to me, I could have still talked about them, right? Sometimes you don't think about it, but figure out what it is you want to talk about and then actually find shortcuts. So for example, you could literally just walk around and record a selfie video, right? Like you could, if you're at a company event or whatever, and you're in your car and you can just record a little thing and you can turn that into a LinkedIn video. By the way, LinkedIn now is vertical. So I would highly recommend to do that. You can put on TikTok if you want to. Maybe that's not your audience. Depending how long you talk, you could throw it into, a transcription tool and then write an article from it. It depends how long it is. But if you're like talking for 10 minutes, that's 100%. That's enough to write something. So there's ways to shortcut the how long it takes, and just figure out what you want to talk about, what is important, and that's really how you leverage it. And then, just make sure people can find it. Make sure people use the right terminology. So there could be a little bit more research involved, but at the end of the day, it drives revenue when you do it well. I'll give you one example quickly. Week. WEAK on Twitter or X or whatever, that's where he had been. He just shares funny things about the agency world and he makes money. And I'm like, you don't even have a call to action at all. There's no call to action. So like you look at the post, you go to the profile. When you click the link on the profile, there's a it's not even a good landing page. It's just like, oh, I can work with you, tell better stories or something like that. And then people reach out because his content is so strong that they want to work with him. It's totally crazy, right? There's no blue or green buttons testing on which one is better. So, if that works for him, why can't it not work for other people? It can't work for other people because their content might not be very good. So you have to have good content, relevant content for your audience to make that work.
Speaking to having relevant content for your audience, would you then say that would actually make your storytelling stand out in competitive pitches and actually help, businesses and agencies to actually close deals with premium clients? Would that be like the way to go?
It is a big part of it. And sometimes people will say, oh, but do they look at it? Nobody ever liked my post on LinkedIn. I mean, I've closed big deals and I know that they read the content. And I've actually had people say that to me. They're like, oh, we need help with this. Oh, we've been reading your content for years. And now all of a sudden it bubbles up. So it certainly helps, especially when there's a tie from the content to the sales call, and people want to, and the message aligns. I think that's another big problem. Sometimes when you have content on one topic and then the sales team says completely different things, and it's like there's a real credibility issue when that happens. But on the flip side, some articles that companies should be writing, they're like a higher level content anyways, like they don't have to talk about everything that the company does all the time. In fact, a lot of times, even on my blog, I talk about things there's nothing I'm even selling on that topic. There's nothing you can buy from me, but I know my target audience cares about it. So I'm still pulling them in, and then, they see that content and now they might see the other content. So there's part of that strategy as well. That's a little bit more advanced, perhaps. I wouldn't recommend that on day one for somebody that's just starting, but certainly that does work.
I think that was one of the things that's a problem in so many different industries is communication. Why are the departments not communicating? Why is the boss not communicating? Why are your sort of mid-level managers not communicating? And if you get that communication wrong, obviously that just opens up a flurry of other things as well, especially when you're looking at content strategy for your social pages.
It's very true. And I think, there's a number of problems why that happens, right? Part of it is everybody's busy. That is one problem, no doubt. And then the other problem, one of the top problems really is that some people's communication just sucks. I'm just thinking about these, and CEOs sometimes do a quarterly update, right? And it's first of all, the first third, you can usually just throw in the trash because it's just gobbledygook. I'm so glad we're all talking about this today. And people are like, I got to go to a meeting. What do I need to know here? And don't get me wrong, there is a place for empathy and that connection. But sometimes, depending what comes in the second third of that letter, the empathy might not work anyways, because if they're saying, oh, we have to restructure and here's what we're going to be doing in the next quarter, right? Here's the new messaging, the empathy, people won't believe it anyways. So you have to figure out how to get the stuff to people in a way that they actually remember it and actually understand it. And the opinions on this are so all over the place that it's actually very hard. For example, do you like one email with 10 things to do? This is completely a little bit extreme, maybe 5. Do you like one email with 5 things to do? Or do you want 5 emails with 1 thing each to do? What's your opinion on that?
I'm the kind of, for me, it would be just give me one email with everything that's in it that needs to be done so that I can work out a schedule and start finalizing stuff and just get on it and sort of tick the box and be done, 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 done,
You like one. You like one. I actually, so 10 is a little extreme. If I get 10 emails in a row, I would be annoyed too. But if it's 3 to 5, I would probably prefer 5 emails, not at the same time, but as it comes up, and just get them. Now, when I was talking to somebody about this on the business storytelling podcast, and they said there's actually research on this, and it's very evenly split. There's about half of the people that want 1, and there's half of the people who want 5. And if you go to 10, I think the number would trigger back to more people want 1. But my point is, you have to figure out what works for whoever it is you're talking to, right? And so if marketing is talking to sales, what actually works for them? Sales talking to marketing, what works for them? And then of course, sometimes we have the whole thing, I've seen this too, where sales things are above marketing because they bring in the money. Well, marketing brings in money too. So you have to build that relationship, right? And that's, I think it's so important to do that correctly and to follow some of those tips on giving it the best shot you can. And that's all we can do, actually.
I'm totally hearing you, Christoph. So true. Now, when it comes to crafting a narrative, what would you say is the balance between telling a brand story and ensuring that it aligns with the client's own goals and aspirations? And then how can this alignment actually drive revenue?
I mean, it has to. We kind of talked about that already a little bit, but it has to align. Otherwise, what's the point? Why are you telling the story? I mean, you're just sitting at the bar and talking about nothing, right? So like that's not the point of business storytelling. The point is, what is your narrative? How does it fit in with the customer's narrative and the client's narrative? And I mean, that's really how you do have to do it. How do you fit in there? And those are the things you have to talk about. I do it all the time, even on ChristophTrappe.com or even Growgetter.io, my day job. And like, okay, we're going to do this topic. Oh, I love this topic. Great. I love it. Will my clients love it? My prospects, do they care about this? And then what do I even have to say about it, right? That's a whole nother thing. There's a lot of companies, even when they start, they just share stuff that's completely generic. It's like go to ChatGPT and say, write me an article on why bald men are better looking than people. So it's not a unique story, right? But if I had my partner, for example, write an article on that topic and talk very specifically about her opinion and blah, 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 and, that's a unique story. So we have to tell these unique stories. We can't just, put up the same gobbledygook. When I was in healthcare, and this has been a while, certainly, but, everybody would write an article on the 4 signs of a heart attack. And I'm like, you are not going to rank for that term because every single healthcare institution or system has already written that article. Now, if you have all of a sudden 5 signs and nobody else has them, and you're the first one, maybe, but it's too vague. But you have to tie it to what your customers care about, your clients care about, and in this case, patients, what they would care about. And other than that, if you don't do that, it's just a tremendous waste of time to even create the content from a business perspective, at least.
In terms of AI itself, as a technology, I mean, it's made storytelling faster and more scalable, right? But in your opinion, where do you think business owners should draw the line between automation and human creativity to actually keep those narratives authentic?
I think a lot of people get AI wrong when they start. And I think in part that is because, there's companies, they just kind of come up with this tool and you can search, you can say, write me an article on whatever, and it writes you an article on whatever based on some content that is somewhere on the web. And some tools, you don't even know where it came from. But I think where the real power comes in is to do the things that it can do quicker for you. So for example, you could take this podcast interview, you could have it transcribed through AI, pretty close already, right? I mean, not perfect, but certainly close enough. Then you can take that article and you can you can take that transcript and throw it into a tool and have a project, have examples, have style guides, all these things. And you can say, here's the article I would like you to write from this podcast interview. Go ahead. And then you have an article based on that source content, right? So you and I are sharing stories, it's completely unique. And then you can do that. What I found is it's never perfect. So you always have to go back, you have to reread it, and you have to say, oh, no, that's not the right style, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, I'm actually still writing the article, except I'm not doing the manual typing. Right? Now, some people will argue, well, you have to do the manual typing to be a writer. I mean, okay, whatever. But it's I'm still writing it, right? I'm saying, no, the opening, so for example, I'm going to totally milk this example to death, but this, the opening for this podcast, I could be truth spoken by a bald man about bald, whatever, something like that. And just and it might not pick that example, But I could just be like, no, there's a better example. Or Kia said this in another point, like use that example. So you're still really writing it, except you're not doing the manual thing. You're just doing the telling it what to write. I think that's how you use AI. I mean, you can certainly for video, you can use it. There's so many different ways. For design, you can use it. And that's certainly an evolving field, to do different things. But I would say make sure it's relevant. Don't just use AI because it's cool. And it is cool. But so for example, I use a tool to do sound bites, like the video clips, right, from this show. And now you can add AI B-roll, right? So like other footage, and it's AI created, but it's completely stupid because so if you and I are talking and then it adds some completely unrelated B-roll, why? Who cares? Like, why? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like the idea is kind of cool, but like for a podcast, it's completely irrelevant. So, I don't know why people would do it, to be honest, but
Because we are now living in such a fast-paced, environment, in such a fast-paced, global environment, we need so much information right now. And because I think that has increased, the role of AI really does assist with that. It is actually just a support system, which is where I see it.
It's true. And, you can kind of, what I just thought of when you were talking there, you can use it to analyze and summarize a lot of content really quickly. Now, you can just be like, okay, throw this in here and tell me the key points that Kia and Christoph made, and who said this or whatever. You can find it really quickly. But the one word of caution, and this is kind of interesting and dangerous because it also gets stuff wrong. So you and I could be talking and, yes, it can, certainly we have very different voices and it can figure that out, but it can still get things wrong.
So I actually want to find out from you, any tools or technologies that you would actually swear by for making the storytelling more impactful while actually still keeping that sort of human touch intact. Do you have any to share?
I mean, I use a bunch of tools every single day. Grammarly certainly is now an AI tool. And we have, I use Otter AI for transcription. There's other tools to use, but the reason I like Otter AI because the speaker, it does probably one of the better jobs to identify the speakers and keep everybody straight. I mean, even if you just say at the beginning, hey, I'm Christoph Trappe, now it knows. You don't even have to tag people anymore, or I refer to your name at some point, and now it kind of puts the dots together. Super awesome. Claude AI is another one. It's really like ChatGPT. I used it initially because I'm a little bit everybody's talking about ChatGPT, and I like that one better just because it's different. And the other thing is, at that point, I think you could on there you could upload documents, and on ChatGPT maybe you couldn't, or I didn't catch it, or something like that. So those are definitely the go-tos. Opus clips I use for to hack up the videos from my podcast. So that works great. In WordPress, get it, believe it or not, but there's now a tool where it writes the SEO title, or gives you a draft at least, and the meta description. It gets it pretty close. It uses a lot of those AI buzzwords, unleash, unlock, blah, blah, blah. And so I don't, transform is another one. And or delf. Before AI, I've never seen the word delf in any content ever. I mean, I couldn't tell you. I've never, and now it's everybody's like, Kia, let's delve into the topic of business storytelling. No, let's just talk about it. I think those are kind of the main ones. There's other tools I test here and there, but I think those are probably the main tools that I currently use.
Christoph, I just want to go to the next question, because in your journey, you've obviously faced a lot of challenges, especially with storytelling. Do you think you can share a time when a story or campaign didn't land as expected, and how you actually adapted to turn that into a win?
There is so many stories that don't land. So for example, let's stick with SEO. So when you write articles for SEO, and yes, when you write an article for SEO, it still should be a good story, it should be unique to your audience, blah, 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 all these different things. But I was looking at the rank rankings for a website the other day, and let's say they have, I don't have it in front of me, but 100 articles, and they have 10 articles that rank in the top 3, which is where you kind of want to get. And they have 80 articles that are like somewhere in the middle, like 8, spot number 4 or whatever, 5 to 50. And then whatever is remaining, the 10, they don't rank at all. So traditionally we would have said, oh, that didn't land. Those articles didn't work. It's not quite that easy, right? Because we want to look at what's the big picture, how does it work? There's also something to be said about the quantity of content. So when people say, we want more quality, don't worry about quantity, I say, we definitely want quality, but you also need quantity, right? Because it just kind of works that way. So there's so many examples, so many cases where some things take off, some things don't take off. So you have to build that portfolio. Don't just say, oh, we're going to do this one campaign, and this is a campaign, and it's make it or break it, right? So if you run one campaign a year, the pressure is going to be way, way higher than if you run even 4 campaigns or 3 campaigns. You know what I mean? Like you have to have a certain level of quantity. When something doesn't work, you have to decide, like you ask, how did you turn it around? And I would challenge that maybe sometimes if it doesn't work, you're not even trying to turn it around. You just go, next campaign, didn't work, move on. You know what I mean? And I mean, there's some content pieces I've done over the years where just didn't work for that audience, you know, for one reason or another. Maybe we used the wrong words. Maybe we weren't unique enough. Maybe, I mean, 100 different things could have happened, and you just have to move on. Now, that's like on the immediate channels. So like social media, email, blah, blah, blah. On your blog, I would let stuff just sit. Like even if that content didn't take off everywhere else, if you still believe it's close on your website, just let it sit. It might take off in a year, you know, or 2 years. Or, I mean, there was when COVID hit, there was somebody on YouTube who just had like no followers, didn't like very few views, but they had a channel and all they did is talk about how to use Zoom. Well, nobody watched it before COVID, and then all of a sudden everybody had to learn how to use Zoom, which, by the way, I don't know what's there to learn. Open it up and turn it on. I mean, but if you don't do that, I mean, it's easy to say today because this is how I talk to people nowadays. But everybody started watching the person's channel, right? Because they were like, what's Zoom? How do you use Zoom? How do you, do I need a camera? Blah, blah, blah. And so it took off completely unexpected, I'm sure, right? Because that person didn't know that COVID was going to hit. So I think that's my biggest advice when it comes to campaigns, whether they're working or not. And also, by the way, what does is it working actually mean? So be sure you understand the goals, and everybody goes after the same goals. And I mean, we have that discussion at Growgetter all the time when we're like, okay, what's the point of this campaign? Why are we doing this? Like, what are we trying to do? And, because there's different strategies for different goals. I mean, if you have, let's pick on ads for a second. If you have a brand awareness ad campaign, very different from one that's truly bottom of the funnel to close the deal right now. And you need them all. But, sometimes, and that's another problem when you have content that's aligned to the wrong part of the funnel. That does happen. I see that happening. I mean, there was one company I worked with a few years ago, and they said advertising doesn't work. And I said, why not? And they said, because nobody ever clicks and buys. I'm like, show me the ad. And the ad was not written for immediate action to buy something at all. It was super vague. So it didn't work because the copy and the stage didn't align, not because ads don't work.
I think that's one of the things that's the hardest, right? To let go. Because in your heart, you feel, why is this not working? I mean, this should be working. But sometimes you got to let go, and then you got to regroup and just find a fresh focus and then get back into it again. And then perhaps find a different angle or something completely new. And then you might actually be able to get into it at that time.
Yep.
So many of our listeners, Christoph, are actually C-level leaders. So they're juggling multiple priorities, right? What's the one piece
Mhm.
of advice you'd give them about using storytelling as a strategic tool to drive business growth?
Yeah, I mean, hire the right people and then let them do the job. I mean, I worked with a huge healthcare system before, and I said, why does it take so long to get things approved? And they said, we have to send it to the CEO. What? Like a $1 billion, healthcare organization or something like that. And I'm like, that's crazy. How does this person even have time to do it? So all I did is I delved into why, and basically he just wanted to make sure it was correct and it was like for the brand and whatever. I'm like, okay, interesting. Who does this person trust? So this person trusted like these physicians. So we created basically a committee of physicians who would review the content and they would review it. Now, it wasn't a committee of bring the article to the committee meeting and then they have a congressional hearing. It was there's people on the committee, whoever gets to reviewing it gets to it first. Whoever has time, do it. So what I just did is I had one person who had no time, and now I had 3 or 5 people that still had very little time, but one of them will have time at some point in the next couple of days to look at this. So figure out how can you make it work while you delegate. You're not an individual contributor as an executive. I mean, seriously, like I know people should know that and people do know that, but sometimes that can be hard, right? Because they're trying to jump in too much and do too much. Also understand how long it takes. And some things take longer. There is some quick successes, no doubt. But marketing is a long-term game. And I think this is why people do a lot of ads, because everybody focuses on winning this quarter. And I get it. Like, I want to win this quarter too. But at the end of the quarter, like the last 2 days, when like people talk about, oh, what can we close in the last 2 days? I'm just kind of like, what have we done the whole quarter? And like, we should have done that all that. So like the last couple days on a quarter, I don't even talk about that quarter anymore. I just talk about what are we doing for the next quarters. So you want to win the current quarter, but to win all the quarters down the road, you have to do things that, like, you have to implement a long-term strategy and actually do it. So keep that in mind, and go from there.
At the end of the day, you do have to have that content strategy in place, because it's not something that's going to just happen in an instant. I mean, this is something that needs to be planned methodically from A to Z, Jan to December. I always find it so shocking when, like you've just said, now people at the end of the year, like, woo, we need to do stuff. No, you should have been planning this from January already, or at least had a 6-month planner. If you can't do like a 12-month planner, because maybe the business that you have, you're not able to project that far ahead, because there are companies that do sit with that kind of turnaround. So at least do like 3 to 6 month projection, then you work on the next 3 to 6 months, and eventually you get to your 12 months, and then the following year.
I mean, I'm with you. I'm feeling it.
Christoph, I want to change things up a little bit now. And what I would like to know is, what are the 4 main things that you feel clients need to look out for in a branding and storytelling agency to ensure the right fit?
Yeah. I think some agency people will hate that I say this, but number one, you want to look at what are they even doing for their own agency. And so we're at Growgetter, we're big believers that we, do what we do for clients as well. We have a podcast, we blog, we do all those things. So some agencies will say, oh, we're so busy. We only work on clients. Great. But if it's going so well, hire a marketing specialist to do the internal content or whatever, So it's a little bit like they're trying to hide. So like, look for, what are they doing for themselves? How do they represent themselves online? I mean, if you look at like the Growgetter profiles online, it's very, very like on brand, everybody, and it's not like we review each other's profiles, but it's just, that's who we are, that's who we hire. And, you can see that people know what they're doing just by looking at them online. Talk to them. There's actually 2 goals working with an agencies that every client will look for. And the first one, some people will vehemently argue is not true, but is completely true. It is, can you see yourself working with that person? So, for example, like, I mean, think about like even us just talking today. Like, it's like I had a lot of fun. It seems like you had a lot of fun. But
Yes.
if we didn't, we would be like, oh my God, like, is this done already? But we've had fun. So like we
Oh,
enjoy
yeah.
just the
Yes.
conversation. And so
Yes.
clients, see, they won't admit this a lot of times, a lot of them, because it doesn't feel like a business reason. And it is and it isn't. But they look at, can they even work with you? Do they like you? Do they enjoy working with you? And this is, I think, some agencies, what they do is they have these personalities come in and sell it, and then they pass it over to some intern that the client doesn't even know, and now they know. I mean, or another person. So you have to kind of figure out, how do you do that? Now, when everybody kind of is similar in personalities, it doesn't matter as much, but that is important. Then the other thing is, can you show results? And you kind of want to prove that and show those numbers and maybe have some examples. So I think that's super important. Um, do your work styles match? I think that's so important. Some people, I mean, people communicate differently, and to make it work, that's very important. Look at their processes, and I hate it. I hate it when people come on my podcast. I shouldn't say it that strong, because a really good friend just used that same term the other day. But in general, I hate it when people come on my show and they say, my 5-step framework, like my framework, blah, 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 because it sounds so, I don't know, it just doesn't sound as good as I think it should sound. But does the agency have a process, and can they explain why it's important, and how does it work? So that's really, really important to, understand how do they work, what's their workflow, how do we interact, and then does that style work, of course, as well. But yeah, I think those are the main things. My word of caution on price: there's some things it's totally fine to buy like the cheaper solution, but working with consultants that know what they're doing, they're usually not the cheapest ones. So you're gonna have to kind of weigh how that works, and if it does.
So,
Yeah,
Christoph,
very
if
good.
you were to like sort of name one trend or innovation in storytelling that you say would dominate in the next 5 years, what do you think that would be, and why do you think business leaders should actually start preparing for it right now?
I want to say authenticity, and that's not really a technology, or it's a trend, but like I think there's going to be a little bit of a course correction for many companies on how do they create content. And I mean, AI will play a huge part in this, certainly. But there was companies that they let their writers go because now they can use AI. And I mean, it's not an untrue statement, but it's not quite that easy. So I think that's going to happen. There's going to be companies that figure out how do they um, turn the boat back a little bit, and share more unique stories. And I think one way you do that, I mean, look at you guys started a podcast, and I don't know if you knew, I mean, it's just, like you're literally in that trend. And I think that's what's so nice about podcasting is, or live streaming even, which I would recommend you do with your show or anybody's show, like live stream it, and then you make a podcast episode. And what's so nice about it is you can actually see the person's personality, and you can see if they know what they're talking about, right? So what I'm talking to you, it's like there's nobody else here. There's no script. I'm just answering. We're just talking. But if it's completely, it goes through marketing, and the copy is touched by 12,000 people, like, is that still me by the time it's done? I mean, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but I think that authentic way of showing yourself is going to become more and more important. Now, I think where the hard part comes in is some people are not nearly as good as doing that. Like, I mean, I say, somebody asked me, who are your perfect guests on the business storytelling show, and I say they bring the steak and the sizzle, right? So they know what they're talking about, right? That's the steak. But they also bring it in a way to make it interesting, to make it engaging, to make it fun when it's okay to make it fun. And I think the sizzle part can be hard for some people. And if the steak part is hard for some people, like, why are they even out there?
So finally, my last question to you, Christoph, and then I'm going to let you go. If you had to distill your storytelling philosophy into a single piece of advice, what would it be?
The biggest thing is you have to figure out what's your story and how does it fit into your customer's narrative, and that's basically it. And then you just have to keep telling it and telling it and telling it and keep going and going and going. My biggest advice when it comes to executives, for example, or anybody, just think about how long it took you to be successful. Storytelling is the same thing. Like, it doesn't just happen overnight, and all the overnight successes are not overnight successes. They took them a while to do them.
So true. Christoph, thank you so much for joining us on the Design Rush podcast. I feel like I can talk to you for hours and hours and hours. But
we
then
do
I'm
have to
going to
work.
keep you away from your life. Sorry, what did you say?
But we do have to work.
Yes, we
at
do.
some point.
But it was absolutely lovely chatting with you. I just completely resonated with so much of the information that you've shared, and I'm sure that a lot of the brands and the agencies and our audience, our Design Rush audience, they're going to appreciate and value every single piece of advice that you've given. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Curious about what top brands look for when choosing an agency? Tune in to our latest episodes where we reveal the decision-making secrets of leading brands. Subscribe to the Design Rush podcast and stay ahead of the competition.